The mob lifestyle is one of the most glamorized and luxurious ideas that has intrigued the general public for years. Who were the most powerful mob bosses and what were their lives like? Albert Anastasia. Albert Anastasia was a man to call when a murder needed to be committed. He'd been doing it for 3 decades and was the greatest in the business. Albert Anastasia, the one and only Lord High Executioner, was one of the most feared and despised mafia bosses of all time. Albert was a student of mafia boss Lucky Luciano. He rode his bandwagon to the top in New York Mafia and led the infamous killing team, Murder Inc. Anastasia's fellow commission members, fearful for their own safety, began plotting Anastasia's death. He was gunned down in his barbershop in 1957, and the image of Anastasia's murder scene is possibly the most iconic mafia image ever. Joe Bonato. Joe Bonato, also known as Joe Bananas, oversaw his mafia family for 3 decades. He began his mafia career in Salvatore Maranzano bootlegging enterprises. He was noted for his street smarts and company management and organization skills. Bonato emerged as one of the 5 New York bosses and a member of the commission. Bonato rose to become one of New York's wealthiest businessmen. Because the Bonatos were very excellent at flying under the radar, he was able to operate with little distraction throughout the majority of his career. He amassed an empire comprised of numerous genuine legal firms. Joe Banana chose modest dwellings and cars to avoid drawing excessive attention to himself. He was forced to go into hiding after his family became embroiled in its first Civil War in the 1960s. The commission would force him to retire, which he did in 1968. When Bonato published his own book, which confirmed the existence of the commission, he irritated the other executives. Nearly a century after he became boss, the Bonato family still wears his name. John Gotti. Following the death of Paul Castellano in 1985, John Gotti became the leader of the Gambino crime family. He was known for his flamboyant public image and haughty feeling of unreachability. He was dubbed the Teflon Don because of his ability to avoid conviction by employing every trick in the book from jury tampering to witness intimidation. Still, he wasn't popular with other mobsters, who thought he was too far flamboyant and aggressive in his exploits. He put too much heat on their business. His reign at the top was brief but eventful, and it left an indelible mark on the Mafia and its culture. His reign as a boss only lasted 5 years before he was sentenced to life in jail, but he continued to control the family through his son and brother Pete. The Gotti family ruled the Gambino crime family from 1985 to 2010, but their fortunes are only a fraction of what they were in the 1980s. The now Teflon Don was in prison for the remainder of his life. In 2002, he died of cancer. After his demise, his brother Peter Gotti took over the Gambino family, but he was only in control for a year before being captured and imprisoned for racketeering. Frank Costello. Frank Costello is the 3rd member of the triad of mobsters responsible for the formation of the 5 families in New York. He collaborated for many years with Lucky Luciano and Vito Genovese until being eclipsed by them both. He was essential in the formation and extension of the Genovese family, and he profited from it for most of his life. In the 1930s, Luciano, Genovese, and Costello were on opposing sides of the turf battle between Maranzano and Mazzaria, after which Luciano gained brutal control and founded the 5 families with Genovese by his side and Costello as his principal counsel, becoming the mob's 3rd most important figure. With this new power, Costello was able to develop gambling and prostitution rackets as far south as Louisiana, as well as genuine enterprises under mob control. Vito Genovese ordered a hit on Costello in 1957, which resulted in him being shot in the head. He survived the attempt, but eventually relinquished leadership to Genovese and retired. He died of natural causes in 1973. Vito Genovese. Vito Genovese played a role in both the establishment and the demise of the 5 families in New York City. It was through his actions that the Mafia began to crumble and the golden era of the Italian-American Mafia came to an end. Genovese and Luciano were brutal in their pursuit of power, assassinating all other major bosses on the scene in the 1920s and seizing control from themselves in the 1930s. Genovese was Luciano's right-hand man, second in charge of the 5 families and leader of one branch named after him, which still exists today. When Luciano was captured in 1936, he briefly served as chairman but swiftly escaped to Italy to avoid murder charges. In 1945, Vito was extradited to the United States to face murder accusations. There was no one remaining after all the witnesses in the case were dead, therefore the charges were dropped. He was back in New York, ready to collect his prize thanks to the assistance of a young hitman named Vincent Chin Gigante. Costello decided to transfer authority to Genovese after Chin shot him in 1957. Vito was not only involved in one coup, he also collaborated with Carlo Gambino and Mayer Lansky to assassinate Albert Anastasia, the most feared gangster of his period. Vito would botch the Alba-Chen meeting and end up back in prison soon after. Vito Genovese died of a heart attack on February 4, 1969, never finishing his sentence, leaving behind a legacy of blood and politics. Mayer Lansky. Mayer Lansky is possibly one of the most important figures in the history of organized crime, with a career extending from 1911 to 1970. He was involved in the most major crime rings in the United States, Mexico, and Cuba. Mayer had a renowned ensemble of Jewish mobsters who followed him around. He had Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, his Bugs and Mayer gang partner. Then there came Lepek Bashalter, the head of Murder Inc. The Jewish mob was on par with the Italian Mafia in New York across the country at the time. He established gambling empires all over the world and was possibly the wealthiest mobster since Al Capone. Despite being Jewish, he wielded more power in the Mafia than anyone else beside Lucky Luciano. Mayer put a lot of money into his offshore companies and kept a low profile in his senior years. Lansky died of lung cancer on January 15, 1983. Al Capone. When you say mob boss or gangster, everyone immediately thinks of Al Capone. He was the first mobster to gain millions and develop a bootlegging empire. Capone amassed more wealth than any other criminal before or since. He had complete control over the delivery of booze. When it came to cinema or entertainment, Al Scarface Capone is the most well-known mobster. Capone set the bar for mob leader ferocity. He would not hesitate to murder a law enforcement officer or a politician. He was well known for murdering multiple individuals with baseball bats. Al Capone was the most powerful and brutal mob boss in history. He executed 7 of his rivals at once in the infamous St. Valentine's Day massacre. For years, Scarface was able to pay off jurors and kill witnesses, but he was eventually brought down by a tax evasion lawsuit. He had syphilis and began to shrivel away in prison, becoming a mere skeleton of what he once was. He would pass away on January 25, 1947. The Chicago outfit, the empire he founded, would live on without him and prosper for many decades after his death. Lucky Luciano. Despite not being as wealthy as Al Capone and a few others, no mobster in American history is more powerful than Charles Lucky Luciano. Lucky was a well-known figure in the New York criminal justice system by the age of 14. His nickname appears to be tied to his ability to escape dangerous situations alive, as well as his astonishing degree of gaming luck. Lucky gave the final commands to all New York top mobsters in the 1920s and the 1930s. He was a vicious killer with a lot of drive and business knowledge, which provided him with an advantage in every circumstance. The Syndicate was a ruling group that included Jewish and Irish mob lords from all throughout the country. This was the first time in American history where crime family leaders agreed to meet down and talk business. His rule, however, could not continue forever, and in 1936, Luciano was caught on accusations of prostitution facilitation and sentenced to 30 to 50 years in jail. He was sent to Sicily after his release. He died in 1962 and was buried in America. That's it for today. Were there some mob bosses that we didn't include? Let us know in the comments down below. Like this video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.